So in this video, we are going to go over the assessment training practices which we compiled together to be the study guide for semester one for Algebra 1. So in question number 1 of topic 1.1, it says, could the product of two irrational numbers be rational? And the most popular irrational numbers are square roots that are not perfect squares. So square root of 5, square root of 7, square root of 10, so on and so forth. So in this example, we chose the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Because how that happens, these are both irrational, but when you multiply them together, you get the square root of 4, which is a perfect square. So then the answer will be 2, which is rational. So irrational numbers are numbers that go on forever with no pattern. Now, rational are numbers that can be written as a fraction of two integers. So for number 2, how I taught it was to create a number line after you convert the decimals. So here we just need from like 2 to 2.5. So we have this number, then we have 7 over 3, then we have the square root of 6, and then we have 2.5. So from there, you can just number it. Make sure that you're reading the directions, least to greatest, so that means smallest to biggest. For number 3, just a true, sometimes true, and never true. Just a good question to get you thinking. An integer is a whole number. Sometimes this is true because all positive integers and zeros are whole number, but integers are whole numbers, like this says, like 4, 5, 7. But integers are also negative numbers, like -6, -3, so on and so forth. So since the negatives are included, those are not whole numbers. So that's why it's sometimes true. For number 4, determine which of the following represents a rational number. So remember, rational is a fraction that is written as two integers. So 3 and 1/3, that's a fraction. You can actually do 10 over 3. So 10's an integer, 3's an integer. And then the square root of 9 is really 3 over 8. So you don't have to simplify or solve. It's just, hey, I can make these two numbers fractions of integers, which are rational numbers. Why B and C aren't, let me zoom in so you can see. The square root of 8 over 9, that square root of 8 is not a perfect square. So that's actually an irrational number. And then the same thing with letter C. Square root of 3 is also irrational. So irrational divided by rational gets you irrational. Okay, set of A is a set of numbers from 11 to 30. So notice in this answer key, you write 11 to 30. And then it also says even numbers. So then you would highlight all the even numbers. And then after that, you would go back and be like, oh, multiples of 3. So 14's not a multiple of 3. 16's not. 20, 22's not. 26, and 28. So it's just trying to get you to have some number sense between numbers from 11 to 30. For number 6, this is considered a rational number because integer divided by integer plus integer divided by integer. Rational plus rational will always equal rational. All right, so for 1.2, notice that I crossed out a bunch of this. That's my fault. I should have only crossed out the steps because we did not do the reasoning this year. It is important to know how to solve an equation. The first step here is to multiply by 2 to get rid of the fraction. Notice it's very important to multiply everything by 2. After you do that, we combine like terms. 8 minus 1 is 7. Now, in this answer guide, we did undo positive 7 by minusing 7. They did it horizontally. If you do minus 7, you're still going to get 3x equals 11. Undo multiplying. I highly recommend keeping the answer as a fraction. Usually for multiple choice tests, answers are written in fraction form, not decimal. For number 2, it says the sum of 3 consecutive integers is 156. So consecutive integers, we start with the first number, which is x. The second number is x plus 1. The third number is going to be x plus 2. Remember, when doing this, you can just come up with any like random number like 6, 7, 8. If you let x be 6, how do we get to 7? We do x plus 1. How do we get to 8 from 6? We add 2. So that's exactly where we came up with this side. And then combine like terms. 3x plus 3 equals 156. You solve the 2-step, you get to 51. How to get to 52? That's the x plus 1 part. How do we get to 53? That's the x plus 2 part. Number 3, we want to find the LCM in the calculator, or well, LCD, but in the calculator we do LCM, and that would be 10, 5. The LCM of this would be 10. So notice that's why we're multiplying every single thing by 10. Do not be concerned when you get a super big number like this. Sometimes it happens. We combine like terms. Remember, 10 over 10 times 1/10 is 1h. 10 times h over 5 is 2h. That was the whole point. This is why we wanted to get rid of fractions first, to have whole numbers. And then it's just a one step after that. So for this next question, let me find it again. I apologize. This is just to show you that no matter how Tarek solved this, he mathematically did it correctly. So when you do this, you can either distribute the 1/3 in and then have a 2-step and get y equals -7. Or you can multiply each side by 3 because we want to get rid of the fraction. Notice right here, nothing happened to that parentheses, 3y minus 6, because we took care of the 3 times 1/3. So I just wanted you guys to see that again. So then we're left with 3y minus 6 equals -27. This is still a 2-step. And you're going to get the same answer. All right, so for number 5, want to be careful. We're talking about a coupon. A coupon means $4 off, so it's -4 each lunch special for 5 days. So that's how many lunches he bought. So that's the number that goes outside the parentheses. So we know his lunch, which is P, took $4 off because of the coupon. And then he had the $75 total. So you're allowed to divide by 5 first, and then that leaves the parentheses. and then add 4 to both sides. Sorry, my pen kind of messed up there. So then P equals 19. So the original price of each lunch was $19. For number 6, you have to be careful. There is a -1 there. Some students make the error of multiplying the 5, which we don't want to do. Some students try to combine like terms first. You always want to take care of this negative sign first. So this is what we did here. Negative times 3q is negative 3q. Negative times a negative 10 gets you that positive 10. And now, once again, this is just your 2-step. Undo adding or subtracting first, and then divide. All right, for topic 1.3, for this one, you want to be careful. You want to distribute whatever number is in front of the parentheses is what you are choosing to distribute. This is variables on both sides. So you are allowed to make the decision. Do you want to move the negative 32m over, or do you want to add 12m? In this answer key, they chose to move positive 32m over, and that's fine. And then once again, you're left with a 2-step. So you have to undo adding 24 by minusing 24 and then dividing by 20. Now, the question is this an identity? The answer will be no. Whenever you have a one solution or a number like x equals 9, y equals -2, or m equals 2, that is not considered an identity. It's considered a one solution. Identity means any solution would work. And then how you would know that is like if you get like 5 equals 5, 4 equals 4, something that's true on both sides, but the variable is eliminated. For the second question, you could do it this way. I am going to show you the way how I taught it in my class. LCM is 5. Everything is taken care of at 5 because I don't personally like fractions. So 5 times 2/5 is 2. 5 times -2/5 is -2. 5 times 3/5 is 3. Notice that what's inside the smaller parentheses are not changing. And then -4x. And then from there, all we're doing is distributing, and then we'll combine like terms. So here I have -2 minus 2, which is 8x minus 4. And then I have 8. Be careful, this has an x. This has an x, so 8x minus 6. Now notice that this answer key and what I'm writing are different work, different steps, but we're going to get the same answer. -4 equals -6 is a false statement, which still symbolizes no solution. So if you keep the fraction, you're still going to get no solution. If you want to get rid of the fractions, the answer still is no solution. For this problem, this is a word problem where you kind of have to set the two parts equal to each other. So we're looking for the m value, which is the rate. So this is happening over and over again. This is a one-time fee of $12. So Malik is equations here. But then Bob is also doing the $5 per mile. So his equation, or his expression, I guess I should say, is on the right-hand side. Now, this is variables on both sides. So this is why the answer key -2m on both sides, and then it's a one-step. So at 4 miles, Malik and Bob would charge the same amount. So the formula of the perimeter. So this is, I know this looks very complicated, but you want to relate it back to, is this going to be a multi-step, two-step, or a one-step? It says that we are solving for L. Right now, we are not allowed to touch 2L. And that's a cursive L. Most mathematicians write a cursive L, so you don't think it's a 1 or an L or something else. Okay, so we can't touch that yet. However, we can touch this positive 2W by minusing 2W on both sides. So P and W are not the same letters, so it's P minus 2W over 2L. Now we are allowed to look at the L. How do we undo multiplying? We divide by 2. So even though we have all these different letters and numbers, it all came down to a two-step equation. Now, especially for a problem like number 2, it looks difficult. But you want to remember all of these things are combined through multiplying. So there's two separate terms that have a lot of stuff to it. But all we care about is this H. So I'm not allowed to touch that stuff yet. I am allowed to move all of this at once because all of that is being added. So how do you undo adding? You minus it. Now, when you get to this step, remember we're getting H by itself. How is 2 and pi and r touching? They're touching by multiplying. How do we undo multiplying? We divide. So we are allowed to divide everything at once in one simple step. And then all you have to do is rewrite it. So even though this looks very complicated, that was only a two-step. We have to undo adding or subtracting first, and then we can take away the multiplying or dividing. Now in topic 1.5a, it's like solving equations, but there's inequalities. So for number 1, distribute. So that is what we did here and here. And then at this step, we combine the negative 12 plus 1, and then we combine the 5x plus 5x. Now, I personally recommend, I'm going to actually erase this step. I personally recommend minusing the 10x on both sides first. It once again does not matter. Then adding the 11 to both sides, you're still going to get the same answer. But your brain can process the information of reading an inequality left to right better. So notice that I'm dividing by a negative. When you divide by a negative, you have to do less than or equal to. So the arrow is pointing this way. It has an equal sign, so that's why it's a closed dot, and then going to the left. Number 2 is basically the same thing. You want to distribute, combine like terms. We want to be careful for false statements and true statements for inequalities. You have to read this to yourself and say, is negative 5 greater than or equal to 3? No, negative 5 is less than. Since it's less than, that's why it's a false statement. So that means it's a no solution. It is not the same as if it was an inequality, or I'm sorry, an equation. Equations like, oh, there's two different numbers equaling each other. That doesn't make sense. You have to read the inequalities. So perfect example of that is number 3. You have to read the answer. 10 is greater than 9. Is that true? Yes, it is. It is true. So the answer will be all real numbers. So on topic 2 of the training assessment, what I recommend you do, especially for the final, is graph this in the calculator. Go to graph and then hit Control T and get any plottable points. The test or ourselves will tell you. Usually I pick -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. If you are at home and you're doing the study guide, Desmos.com has a graphing calculator that you can use as well. For number 2, the y-intercept is always where does your line cross. At this case, it crosses 0, 4. And then you can pick 2 points. Here's 1 point. And then you can pick another point. How many did I fall? I fell 2. How many did I go to the right? I went 6. So -2 over 6 simplifies to -1 over 3, which is our m value. You put the two things together to get y equals mx plus b. For number 3, it's a little more involved than that. You want to pick your x1, y1, x2, y2. Calculate the slope. In this case, it's 1. And then you're going to have to do a triple substitution. So what I've always told my students is pick the easiest ordered pair. I know 3, 6 is pretty easy because they're positives. So my y2 goes here, my x goes here, and then my 1 goes here. Multiply, and then this is a 1 step. And then put the 2 together. If you want to write that 1 and write it as y equals 1x plus 3, that would be acceptable answer. All right, for 2.2, notice all the slopes are the same, -3, -3. So that's fine. We don't have to worry about that. You want to be careful. This is really your x. This is talking about y's. So the ordered pair is the opposite of -7, which is 7, -1. This is -2, +10, 2, -2, and then 3, 5. So which 2 ordered pairs are on the table? -2, 10 is, and then 2, -2. Point slope form. Pick any ordered pair. We chose to do 9, 1. That's your x value. Find the slope from rise over run, which we did previously in another example. And then all you have to do is plug in your y and your x and then your m value. And then write the equation in point slope form. Same idea. Here's your point, x, y. Here's your m value. The only thing you need to simplify, this minus sign comes from the problem or comes from the formula. This minus sign comes from the actual problem. Negative times a negative is positive, so that's why it's a +2 inside the parentheses. For number 4, you want to find the slope. So 50 guessed, it cost $1,150. For 75 guests, it costs $1,600. So that's our x. This is our y. You can call this x2, y2. And then calculate the slope. So the slope is represents $18 because the cost is on top per the people. So then it would be $18 per person. Use the point slope form to find the cost. So all you're doing here is plugging in x. X equals 125. Once you do that, you simplify. 18 times 75 gets you 1350. And then it's a one step. We're going to add 1150. So the cost is $2,500 for 125 people. The same thing for number 5. So 2 weeks, that's going to be your x. This will be your y. This will be your x2, y2. And find the slope. Original amount, that's a key for y-intercept, which is your b value. So this is your m. Now you can choose any ordered pair you want. The answer key chose this. So this is your x value, this is your y value, and then this is your m. So that was the triple substitution. You multiply negative 84 times 5. That's where this negative 420 comes from. And then this is going to be a one step for the b value. All right, in this part of the video, we are going to talk about the 2.3 training assessment practice. Whenever it says to find the x and y intercept, you want to remember that the ordered pair is always x comma y. And when we're talking about the x-intercept, y will always be 0. And when we are talking about the y-intercept, x will always be 0. So once you substitute in y equals 0, you're going to multiply whatever number is in front, in this case negative 4, and then that's going to wipe it out. And then we are going to be left with a one step. So in this case, we divided by 3 and get x equals 8. You always want to go on the x-axis for your x-intercept. So where is 8? It's right there. And then you do the same thing here. In this case, it's going to be x equals 0. So then you're going to substitute in the 0. Be careful if the coefficient of the variable y is negative. You want to make sure that you write down negative. So then 24 divided by negative 4 will get you the negative 6 on the y-axis. Once you plot those 2 points, draw a straight line using a straight edge, and then draw the arrows on the end. For number 2, you have to actually make your equation. When we are talking about an equation like this, it says standard form. Please recall that standard form is ax plus by equals c. So almonds is going to be your coefficient of x. 6 will be your coefficient for y. And then your total is 72. That's why it's equal to 72. And then for part B, you do exactly what we did in number 1. You're going to be left with 6 comma 0, which is right there. And then 0 comma 12. And then connect it using a straight edge. Now in this situation, it says they want about the same amount of the cashews. So the easiest thing to do, you're going to graph the equation. Since it's not in slope-intercept form, you have to hit the delete button and then click on relation. So then 12x plus 6y equals 72. And then you're going to hit menu, trace, and then graph trace. And then you can just move up and down the line. which is about 4 comma 4. This is just a rough estimate, so when you trace the graph, it's not going to be exact. But when you graph it by hand, you'll notice that it intersects at 4 comma 4. So number 3, got to solve for y. This is a literal equation. To undo a positive 12x, you want a minus 12x, and then you're left with a 1 step. Make sure if you can simplify, you do simplify. So negative 3x plus 2. So then we're going to begin at positive 2 and go down 3, right 1, down 3, right 1, and continue until you can't. For number 4, same idea as number 2. You're going to create an equation. It says the total is 120. We know each pen costs $1.25. Each pencil costs 25 cents. So we're talking about the X's here. X's are the pens, and we don't want any pencils. So that is why our y equals 0, and you're going to get a total of 96. And then you're going to do the same idea for the greatest amount of pencils. So then we don't want to buy any pens. So that's why our x equals 0 for that one. One strategy you can do to see which ones are correct is plugging in the x value, 11 into x, 425 into the y value, and notice that we are getting a true statement, so that means that's correct. And then the same thing for choice D. Now, if you do, let's say A, 20, 385, if you plug in these two values for your x and y, you are going to get a false statement. So just go to the calculator, 1.25 parentheses 20 plus 0.25 385. You can use the equal sign, it's right below the control. And since it's false, it's not a solution. For topic 3.1, the best idea is to write in mapping diagram. Remember smallest to biggest. And if it repeats, write the number once. So we have 1, 3, and then 6. Negative 3 maps to 6. Negative 1 maps to 3. 0 to 1. 1 to 3. And then 3 to 6. It is a function for every x value. There's only one y. The reason why it's many, we have a few numbers going to 3 and we have a few numbers going to 6. Now for number 2, it's the same thing. Our x value is 2, so we cannot have another x value of 2. That would make it not a function. All right, so for this problem, to identify domain and range, we're talking about tickets, so whole numbers, like you can buy 1 ticket, 2 tickets, 3 tickets, so on and so forth. And then the cost is $75, so after 1 ticket, it's $75, then $150, and then $225. All right, so for number 4, yes, there are constraints for the domain. Since he swam 15 to 25 laps, it's whole numbers, so 15, 16, 17, etc. Number 5, all you had to do was for domain is write the x's, range is the y. Same thing with number 6. Number 8 is a discrete functions because puppies can only be whole numbers. Time for part B is continuous because you can have fractions and decimals. And so is the case with speed. Now, number 7, it is a discrete function because the domain and range are restricted to whole numbers. So we're only talking about day 1, day 2, day 3 for June, and we're only talking about the amount of customers, which are whole numbers. So for number 1 on topic 3.2, you're going to have 2 problems. You're going to plug in 2 into the x's. And you're going to evaluate that. You're going to put it in the calculator and you're going to get 1.8. And then you're going to do the same thing for 4, f of 4, which means input of 4. So 3 parentheses 4 minus 1 minus 0.2, 8 minus 4. This one, you add the 2 answers together, which is going to be 1.8 plus 8.2, and that's why it's connected to 10. And you repeat the process for part 2, part 3, and part 4. Notice you can do the same thing for number 2. Here's a list of domains. So you're going to plug in -2 into the x value, evaluate. Plug in number or the input of 1 and evaluate. You're going to do that for all of the domains and then list the ranges, which are your answers. So reasonable domain for number 3. Sawa can sell between 0 to 50. Well, she can sell shirts, but think about working. A normal work week is about 40 hours. So 0 to 50 or between 0 and 50 would be a reasonable amount of hours someone could work. 3 would be too small, and you can't really work between 68 and 80 hours a week. For here, all you're doing is listing the ordered pairs. So listing the ordered pairs, for example, this is -2, comma -1.5. This is -1.5, comma -1. So the -2 and the -1.5 are the x's, and then -1.5 and -1 are the y values. And you just keep repeating that process. For number 5 and 6, you can show work like the answer key, but I do recommend using the calculator. Going to number 4, list in spreadsheets. Make sure that you label X and Y. And I'll just do number 6 as an example since that's what's showing on my screen. So you just enter the values. Now when you enter the values, you want to have a blue rectangle and then go to menu, number 4, number 1, number 3. And then here it's going to give you your M, which is -5, and your B, which is positive 173. You can also go to Control T to get the table. So if you scroll up, Negative 15. Let me move my window a little bit. Negative 15 actually goes to 248, not 246. So that's why that's wrong. Number 7, just put this in the graphing calculator, hit Control T to get the table of values and then plot them. All right, so real quick, I skipped number 7, but number 8's almost identical. So what you want to do is go to Add Graphs, type in negative 1 over 3, 2 minus, let me actually start over. I want you guys to get confused with the table. So negative 1 over 3, parentheses 2 minus x, that's 4. So this is what the line should look like. So this is one way of checking your work. If you hit Control T for table, you can plot whatever points you want. Usually we do negative 2 to 2, but if you want to stay away from the decimals, that's fine. But then just make a table for yourself and then plot the points. Now for topic 3.5, positive, negative, and no correlation. Positive means going up and to the right. Negative is down to the right. No association means there's no correlation. There's no relationship between the two pieces of data. Number 2, I'm just going to show you how to do this on the calculator, which we expect you to do on the final. So you want to go to Add Lists and Spreadsheets. We're talking about cakes, talking about time. Always important, especially when you have a lot of data, to take your time and make sure that you are doing this correctly. Make sure you have a blue rectangle. Number 4, number 1, number 3. We said our x was cakes. We said our y was time. So this should be our slope. Notice our slope is negative 0.47. So that's a negative correlation. So then you just put the information that you found. So I found the slope to be negative 0.47, so that's why it's mx. And then plus, we just rounded to the nearest hundredth, so 4.37. And then you would do the same thing for this one. You would enter these ordered pairs into the calculator and then go through the same steps that I just did. Same with number 5. Please notice positive correlation. It is going up and to the right. I do have a positive slope. Now, part D is very important because this is your X value. It says your X is books. So you're inputting your 11 and then you're evaluating. 12 times 11 plus 457 gets you the 136.57. This is a negative correlation. It's going down and to the right. You can notice that by the slope. Once again, you would enter all of that data into the graphing calculator and come up with the equation. Same thing for number 7. Enter it into the graphing calculator. The slope is the cost of one activity. And then remember, before they did any activities, they had dinner. So the y-intercept is the starting point. So that's why it's the cost of his dinner. And once again, number 8 is type this into the x's, this into the y, get your m equals, and then your b equals, and then write it in y equals mx plus b form. Now residuals, it's very important to create the equation of the line because you're trying to find the difference between the actual point and the predicted point. This looks like a good model because it's randomly distributed above and below. So we kind of have 3 above, 3 below. If you look at the difference or the side number, notice that 0.6 is very close to 0, so it's not very high. Number 2, Arthur's model would be better because they're more distributed. Couple on top, couple on bottom, and they're closer to the x-axis. Notice this is like 2.5. This is negative 2.5. Here it goes all the way up to 5. So it's definitely closer to the x-axis. But you really want to look. We have all these points above, but we don't have any below. So Tavon's did not work. For number 3, I'm not going to do this data, but just to show you, you find the R when you're on this screen right here. So when you enter the data, it's going to be R is about 0.99. So anything from 0.5 to 1 is considered strong positive. This would be weak positive. And then the same for this. This is strong negative. And then this would be weak. Now, number 4, R is a perfect 1. So the residuals are perfect. They are all on the x-axis, so it's perfectly linear. This is a strong positive. We briefly talked about causation. So even though they are related, it does not mean one thing causes another. Causation is a possibility, but more can be influencing the relationship between it. The same thing for number 6. Can it be inferred that the number of children in a household causes an increase of heating bills? No. To determine that and the number of children have a causal relationship, so you have to carry out an experiment that can control the other variables that may influence the relationship. All right, thanks, guys.